Okay, just want to welcome everyone here tonight. We've already said our blessing for the Torah study, so we'll get right into it. Are there any comments or questions that somebody had from the past questions that or the lessons that we had on Samson, especially on Samson, because he's kind of a complex character, as it were. And do want to let you know that last weekend we were able to get that grandson of mine married off, and I was practicing knots for the whole week before he got there. So we tied that wedding up really good. So he's not ever going to get out of that one. And it was a good time. We had a whole bunch of folks there, and it was really a lot of fun. And nobody, there were no fights that I saw anyway. So that's just a joke. All right, let's go ahead and get going with our class here tonight. We're going to do chapter 15 of Judges, and here's our little timeline, and that timeline. We're coming up basically in the 1100 BCE time frame, something like that. And it's just about 100 years before David takes command, takes the kingship. And then again, here's our map that just shows where the judges were from. And of course, we see Samson down here, right in the middle of the country, pretty much, and just west of Jerusalem, but still up in the highlands, because Samson is from the tribe of Dan, and they never really were able to take the land that was allotted to them, and so they just kind of stayed up here in a little cluster right there in the middle of the country. All right, and then this one here still got the incursions of the Philistines into Israel and Judah, and so we'll be probably looking at that a little bit more. And tonight we're going to be in again, I just wanted to show you where we're talking about here with Dead Sea, Jerusalem, Zorah, where Samson was born, Timnah, where he tried to marry the woman there, and so forth. So I've got some other maps later on that will explain some of the things that where we're at. Okay, so let's go ahead right with the lesson then. In starting out with Judges 15:1 and 2, but after a while, during the time of wheat harvest, Samson visited his wife with a young goat. "I'm going to my wife in her room," he said, but her father would not let him enter. "I thought for sure you were utterly hated her," and her father said, "so I gave her to your best man, her younger sister. Now, isn't she better than the other one, than her? Please let her be yours instead." Oh, wow. That just says volumes right there, doesn't it? Okay. We don't know what after a while actually means. And so, but there's a time frame, there's a gap in there from the time that we left Samson, where he'd gone and lost his little riddle because his wife told on him, and so then he went down. That's when he went down to Ashkelon and killed 30 people and took their clothes and brought it back up to where these guys were, so he could pay off the wager that he had said that if you could get my riddle, I'll pay each one of you a set of clothes and underwear. And so that's what he had to go and kill somebody, kill 30 men and steal their clothes, their outer garments, and their underwear. That was real. I mean, that's a picture that you just can't unsee. All right. So, like I said, we don't know how long this time was, but we do know what time of the year it was. It was at the wheat harvest. So that would put it in the springtime. And the right around Shavuot is before the hot summer. And so he brought a goat um, with him, it says. And so we, looks like that Samson was at a point where he was thinking, oh well, things have cooled down. I've cooled down. Maybe these guys, they won't take it so hard that I killed 30 of their people. And so he was kind of willing to let bygones be bygones, and that's that's a very naive attitude. He figured that I can just start off where I could go back and pick up where I left off, and everybody would be okay with it. And I'll bring along this goat so we can cook have a barbecue, and I mean what says all is forgiven better than barbacoa, huh? So anyway, they he went down there, and he says, just typical of Samson, he goes up to the place and said, I'm going to my wife. And so the father said, nope, nope, nope. And because he had given her away, he had actually given the woman to one of the other companions that they had arranged for Samson to have there at that wedding. So I mean that was quite a blow for Samson. And then the father, and kind of seeing his disappointment and so forth, he says, well, he said, why don't you take the younger sister? I mean, she's a lot better than the first one. Now, of course, hopefully the first one didn't hear that, but anyway, he says, take the younger sibling. She's better than the first one. And Samson, no, he wanted the other one instead. So it just did not work out very well. I mean, offering that younger sister, that kind of reminds us back at with Laban and Jacob, where he gets Leah when he thinks he's going to be getting Rachel. And so then he had to work another 7 years to get Rachel. So it was just, I guess they could just shift the wives around, like, or the women, they could shift around, do whatever they wanted to with them, and it really didn't. It was really up to the men to do that. Women didn't have much of a say in that regard. So anyway. Any comments or questions on that? Anybody got any ideas on that? All right. So let's go ahead. Verse 3. Then Samson said to them, this time I am blameless from the Philistines when I do harm to them. So Samson went and caught 300 foxes and took torches and turned the foxes tail to tail and put one torch between every two tails. Then he set fire to the torches and released them into the standing grain of the Philistines. Thus he burned up both the stacks and the standing grain, along with vineyards and olive trees. So I guess, after a little bit of reflection and time and everything, thinking back on it, Samson must have think, you know what, probably when I went down there to Ashkelon and killed those 30 guys and brought the food, the clothing back up to them, maybe that was a little excessive and so forth. So, but this time now, he's saying, this time I am blameless, because now what you've done is you've taken away my wife. And so now what I end up doing to you, nobody can blame me for that, because it just makes a lot of sense of what I'm going to do now. And so there's a lot of um, it seems like there's more questions here than there are actual answers. And but he decides, well, okay, well, I'm going to go out there and punish somebody because of this guy is not giving me the woman that I wanted. And so then said he captured 300 foxes. Now the foxes are a kind of a rare breed over there in Israel. Jackals are possibly um, another way of looking at that it could very well be the word for jackals. And so I don't know. Either way, it really doesn't make any difference which way you look at it, whether they're a fox or a jackal, one of those kind of wildish dog creatures. And but it said he found 300 of them. Now, how he did that, you read the stories about Samson. They said, well, he must have had uh, a special power with animals and so forth, to be able to capture that many of them and set them loose. And it would have taken a little bit of time. Surely he's not going to catch 300 of them overnight. So who knows how he did this? Did he catch them and then hold on to them somehow, or did he catch them and just start running them through the fields as he caught them? Burning stuff out, burning the Philistines out. It doesn't tell us, and it's just in a way, it really doesn't make any difference. But what he ended up setting 150 fires around the Timnah area. Now, if you can imagine, that area is already dry anyway, and even in today's world, when the Palestinians want to create problems for Israel, what do? They launch some kind of fire into the forest or into their grain fields or something like that. So it's still a weapon of war today in that part of the world. And so what we do know is that then the fires just devastated the economy around Timnah. It would have been localized, of course, but there around Timnah, those fires were just destroyed everything. So all of their wheat and even their vineyards and their olive groves were destroyed, were affected. And so, yeah, that was incredible that he could go in there and do all of that. And so, in effect, he was kind of declaring war on the Philistines. So going ahead, there's a picture of him getting with those foxes. Yeah. And I don't know how in the world he got the foxes, how he trapped them or anything like that, but he's got them all tied up there, sure enough. So going ahead, then the Philistines asked, who did this? They were told, Samson, son-in-law of the Timnite, because he took his wife and gave her to his best man. So the Philistines came up and burned her and her father with fire. Then Samson said to them, since you acted like this, surely I will take revenge on you. After that, I will quit. So he struck them leg upon thigh with a great slaughter. Then he went down and stayed in the cleft of the rock of Edom. All right. So said, when the Philistines asked who did this, that must have been the Philistines, people around, not in Timnah itself, but they said, okay, Samson, the son-in-law of the Timnite. And so, I mean, they've gone from being more of a close-knit little society now, to where they're blaming somebody for this, and they're blaming Samson, and then also the son, or the father of this girl that Samson wanted to marry. And so you see that change that when we're talking about in chapter 14, they were talking about the men of Timnah, but now they're talking about Philistines, a little bit broader category. And we never did learn the wife's name or her father's name. He was just the father-in-law of Samson, but they don't. They say the Timnite. So it gets down to a point where, okay, the Philistines are now kind of separating themselves from what's going on here in Timnah, and then they burned, in a especially cruelty there. They burned up this bride and her family with fire. I mean, they burned them alive. I guess we can kind of surmise from the way that is what the language was. So they considered this family if not the source of it, they were of the problem, because actually Samson was the problem, but they're the ones that are to blame for setting him off. And so they decide, okay, well, we're going to burn them out. So they, when Samson hears about this, then of course he stands up in front of these people that did it, and he says, "I will take revenge, and after I've taken my revenge, then I'll quit." So there was kind of a limit maybe to Samson's destructive nature. He was maybe getting a little bit older and getting a little bit wiser in what was taking place in the world. And so, a lot of times before they have battles and so forth, they would have a pre-battle parley where they're up there and talking back and forth at each other. You remember Jephthah had a long-range parley between himself and the king of the Ammonites, and and here it's just a very, very short thing. Samson gets up in front of them and says, "I will have my revenge. I'm going to take revenge on all of you people." And that was it. That was the extent of his speech. And then the Philistines didn't come back with a rebuttal or anything. And it kind of shows that kind of shows that Samson was he was ready to go and exact revenge on these guys for what they had done, even though he had lost this bride. Just the very idea that they'd killed a woman that he thought he loved, that was enough for him, and he was going to take revenge on them. So he wasn't going to stick around and talk about it very much. He was more of a man of action. And you'll see that he was in this point speaking for himself. He was not speaking for Israel or anything. This was a personal affront that it personally offended Samson, not Israel or anybody associated with Israel. Like in the case of Jephthah, it was more of a corporate Israel that he was fighting for. But Samson here now, this is local, and it's all on him. And in this regard, that he's taking revenge over these people, he could probably look at the Mosaic law that said, if you had one, if someone had killed one of your relatives, then you would the one who killed the relative could flee to a sanctuary city so that the avenger of blood could not kill them. The avenger of blood was a family member that in some way then they could go out and kill the person that killed their family member. And but if they went to the city of refuge, then they couldn't do that, and that's the way God set it up. So um, possibly Samson was thinking of himself now as a legal, a rightful avenger of blood, and that what he is about to do is okay because he's taking vengeance over these Philistines that had killed his wife, even though they never, as we can surmise, they never consummated their marriage, but they were betrothed. And so now he's taking it out, all out attack on the Philistines. And it's said that he killed a bunch of them. It doesn't say, it just said a large number. And so, it said he struck them. It's real short little sentence. He says, so he struck them leg upon thigh with a great slaughter. And then he went down and stayed in the cleft of the rock at Edom. So, I don't know exactly what leg upon thigh, where that comes from. But other than your leg is connected to your thigh. So I don't know how that makes. It's just a strange way of saying it. But he killed a lot of people. And so that was part of his revenge. So true to his word, after he finished killing all of these people, then he says, okay, I'm out. And so he went over to a place just southwest of Bethlehem. And he kind of holed up in there. There's a place called the Cleft, and people knew where it was. I mean, the locals knew it, but they didn't let that information out to the others. And so that's where he went. He went to hide out for a while, and until things cooled down a bit. So, all right. Any comments or questions thus far? Everybody's going to be quiet tonight. Is that what it is? Okay. All right. So then the Philistines went up and camped in Judah and spread out in Lehi. The men of Judah asked, okay, why have you marched against us? And they replied, we have come to arrest Samson to do to him as he did to us. So he'd killed, I don't know how many people by this time, and so I don't know what they thought that they could do to him, because you can only kill somebody once. And but anyway, they wanted to get him and probably torture him, and the Philistines were not known for their kindness anyway. So they went up and marched against Judah. And remember that Judah was supposed to be the preeminent tribe of all of Israel, and so these guys says, okay, well, if we go up to their headquarters, to their main place there, and talk to them about it, then maybe they will be able to do something against Samson, because Samson was really becoming a problem for them. And so they went up there with 3,000 men. Now, it looks like that it possibly, and I'm not sure, that the Judeans didn't really know too much about what Samson was doing. I mean, they were, even though it was close, so you're talking about just a few miles from Jerusalem over there into Dan, in the territory of Dan. But that was different tribe, and they were everybody was supposed to be trying to fight and take over their land anyway. So maybe they just figured this just another guy that's out there fighting the Philistines, and it was kind of a ho-hum thing. They didn't realize this is getting to be a big, serious matter. And So the Philistines, they just told him, said, look, we're here to arrest Samson and to do to him what he did to us. We're going to kill him 5 times. So um, they that was the simply put what they were there for. And so um, then we go on to verse 11. Then 3,000 men of Judah went down to the cleft of the rock in Edom and said to Samson, hey, what don't you realize that the Philistines are ruling over us? So what is this that you have done to us? He said to them, as they did to me, so I have done to them. And they said, we have to come down to bind you, they said to him, so that we may hand you over to the Philistines. So Samson said to them, okay, but swear to me that you yourselves won't kill me. You know what I think about when I read that little bit right there? I think of the Incredible Hulk. Okay, here is a map of where Samson went. Here's Bethlehem. Here's Jerusalem right here, and there's Edom. All right, but anyway, I think about um, Incredible Hulk, and so he says, um, these guys, the Judeans, come to him and says, "Hey, man, what were you thinking, going and attacking the Philistines? Don't you know that they rule over us, and they could just do all sorts of stuff to us?" And it didn't. He was not persuaded. He said, "Look, I'm just doing to them what they did to me. It's payback." And but then they said, "Look, we have to turn you over." So um, Samson, kind of resigns himself to that fact, I guess, and says, "Okay, well, I will. I'll go with you. You can bind me." But he says, "Just promise me that you yourselves won't kill me." And so there's where I think about the Incredible Hulk, is that, okay, everything's going fine until he gets triggered. And then all of a sudden he just goes into this rage and he starts, destroying everything around him. Samson did not want to destroy his own people. And so he said, look, don't uh, try to kill me. And because he knew what he was capable of, and was afraid that he would be able to, really go against his own people. But this whole thing here at this point is really a tough thing in the history of Israel and the history of what they were, just their relationships with each other between the tribes and so forth. So um, they had actually reached a real low because they were, rather than standing up to the Philistines, they said, okay, no, we'll try to get Samson and turn him over to you, so that you won't raid our territories, won't bother us, and so forth. I'm sure what they're thinking is, hey, it's just one guy. We can give up one guy for the good of all, that sort of thing. It wasn't like, oh, no, you're not. You're not going to take one of our guys. He's one of ours. You're going to have to fight us for him. No, they didn't do that at all. They just said, yeah, we'll go get him. And so it's kind of a low spot I think, in the morals of Israel, that they would turn over one of their own just so that they didn't have to themselves put themselves into any danger. Um, and like I'd said before, Samson is just saying, look, these guys did this, and now I'm going to do against them. I have done what I did because of what they did to me first, that sort of thing. Not exactly true. I mean, when you get right down to it, because Samson, killing those 30 guys at Ashkelon, that was probably in poor form that he did that, and so that made a bad mark against him, and all of the people from the Philistine territories there would be, they would think that Samson was an outlaw. They don't know what they wouldn't call him anything else but a lawless person. So, so they get him. They said, "No, look, we have to bind you." And but you know, there again, uh, Samson says, "Okay, you can do that, but please don't try to kill me. Because if you do, it's not going to go well." And so anyway, they go ahead and they said, "No, we won't kill you." They said to him, "but we will bind you fast and hand you over to them." So they bound him, and with two new ropes, not just one. They wrapped him up twice as much as they would wrap up anybody, and then they went from there, and they brought him out of this cleft of this rock, and then they took him to Lehi, which that's a town. Let's see if I got my trusty map up here. Okay. Lehi is right around this area right here, right, kind of sort of between Zorah and Timnah. That's where that is. Okay, so and we really don't know exactly where it is today. Yeah, there's my map of it. It was real small pixels there, so it's not real crystal clear, but you can see that Bethlehem is down here. So he had been right down here at that spring and Edom, right in here, and then they carried him over to here. So that is what, I don't know if I could read that. How many miles? That's 10 or 15 miles out there across. So it would have taken them a day or two to get him over there, but they brought him to this area of Lehi, which we really don't know exactly where it's at right now to this day. But anyway, they brought him there, and they bound him up with two new ropes, and then when they arrived at Lehi, the Philistines shouted upon meeting him. They were really outraged, and they started shouting at him. But it says that the ruach of Adonai, ruach Adonai, the Spirit of God, His Holy Spirit, came mightily on Samson, and so that on his arms, the ropes on his arm became like flax burned with fire, and his bonds melted off his wrists. So again, was there fire that burned the things off and melted them off? No, I don't know that there was. I think that is metaphorically speaking. It's poetic speech about what happened to the cords that were around Samson. He just pulled them off as easily as if you've seen grass burning. You can hold some grass up, even grass that you've twisted into strands, but once it burns, it's nothing. It has no strength at all. So here's what they're saying is that that when these people were shouting at Samson, then the Holy Spirit came on him mightily, and he just basically threw off the bonds that were around him. And then he went ahead and he found a fresh jawbone of a donkey, reached out, took it, killed 1,000 men with it. So then Samson said, with the jawbone of a donkey, two heaps with the jawbone of a donkey, I struck down 1,000 men. As soon as he had finished speaking, he threw the jawbone from his hand. Then he named the place Ramat Lehi. All right, now it says that that he just found a jawbone. Okay, now I saw this picture here. I was really tempted to get a picture maybe of some of the current people in Washington, because this one is labeled here "Jawbone of a Donkey," and so thought, well, that would have been funny, but no, I think for posterity that I'll just leave it at this. One other funny thing about the jawbone, when I was um, when I was in Israel, we were in a dig, and an archaeological dig, and actually in this deal, I came up with a jawbone, and I don't know if it was a jawbone of a donkey or if it was a jawbone of a calf or something. More likely, it was kind of a calf or something that he, because it didn't seem as really big and long as that one did there. So anyway, it said he just found this thing, found a jawbone. Now that's kind of like Abraham finding the ram in the thicket. So God had put out this jawbone someplace for him. I mean, what would the circumstances be that he would find a jawbone of a donkey? And they said it was fresh. So I don't know. Maybe who knows? Maybe these Philistines ate donkeys, if for their food or something like that. Anyway, so he found this jawbone, and with that, it said he killed 1,000 people. And but at this point, he had the Spirit of God on him, and so you look at it and say, okay, how could he kill 1,000 people? And it goes back also to the definition or the translation of what they're talking about here. There are some that say, well, what they're talking about is that it was it was like a squad or a company of men, something like that. So that instead of killing 1,000 people, that Samson killed 25 or something like that. But I don't know. It's just that there are people that talk about that, that translation, and I've spoken of it before too, where the horrendous numbers of people that they talk about in the Bible of being killed in battle on that day. That to me it was always, maybe it's one decimal place off there. Instead of thousands, it was hundreds or something, and that would make a little bit more sense. But at the same time, I'm not going to say it's wrong. It's just that I don't understand it and how that could have actually happened. But then he said that they piled up the 2 heaps of carcasses that they piled up, guys, because he struck them down with the jawbone of a donkey. And so then when he had done all of this, and he had sang his little song, which was, with the jawbone of a donkey a heap, 2 heaps with the jawbone of a donkey. And I think in Hebrew it probably is a little bit more poetic when you do it in English. It's just not the same, Okay, so then he named the place Ramat Lehi. All right, and again, we don't really know where that place is today. They got some idea perhaps, but not exactly. All right, so any comments or questions that you got so far? All right. Then on going ahead on verse 18, then he became very thirsty. So he called to Adonai and said, you have granted this great delivery by the hand of your servant. So now will I die of thirst and fall into the hand of the uncircumcised? But God split the hollow place that is in Lehi, and water came out of it. When he drank, he regained his strength and revived. Therefore he called it Ain Hakor, which is in Lehi to this day, a spring. So then he judged Israel in the days of the Philistines for 20 years. All right. So evidently, the killing people with the jawbone is hot and tiring work, and it made him very, very thirsty. And so then he called out to God for water. He says, "Hey, look, I've killed all of these people now. Now am I going to just die of thirst and from all of this?" And so God heard him. He split the rock or split something in two there in this hollow, and water came spilling out. And Samson was able to revive himself. And then it's just kind of a funny thing here in that he says that then he judged Israel in the days of the Philistines for 20 years. So after this, evidently people must have taken note of Samson, and that here is someone that is fighting against the Philistines. So uh, they made him a judge over all of them, and it says of a judge over Israel. So we see here then that the men of Judah, they lost their preeminence. Judah was supposed to be the premier um, tribe that went out ahead of everybody in battle, and they were the strong tribe. But in this case, they let a guy from Dan, so the Danites couldn't even secure their own territory. You'll find later on in this book of Judges where they packed up and left and went to another place because they just couldn't fight all of these Philistines. And whereas God had promised them, if you will go out in a battle against these people, I will fight the battle for you and you will win. But they didn't want to do that. So anyway, that's just as we close out this particular chapter of Judges, and we've got one more chapter to go of Samson, and of course that's the real famous one that everybody knows is the deal of Samson and Delilah.